After 36 years in the grave, Tim Burton has finally decided to resurrect Beetlejuice in the long-awaited sequel. This one's called Beetlejuice Beetlejuice. Wait, is that 3 times? Crap. What's up, my dude? Your friendly neighborhood Tony here, and as I do with all my movie reviews, I'm going to give you a little bit of information about Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, who made it, what it's about, all that good stuff. Then I'm going to go into the things I did and did not like about the movie, the pros and cons. And finally, I'm going to let you know who I think Beetlejuice Beetlejuice is for, if anyone. If that kind of thing sounds cool to you and you want to keep up to speed on all the new big movies coming out, make sure you subscribe. In Beetlejuice Beetlejuice, after a family tragedy, 3 generations of the Deetz family return to their home in Winter River. Still haunted by Beetlejuice, Lydia's life is turned upside down when her teenage daughter Astrid accidentally opens a portal to the afterlife. Beetlejuice Beetlejuice is of course another horror comedy fantasy. This one's written by Miles Millar and Alex Goff, who worked on the show Wednesday most recently. They also wrote on Smallville, the show from back in the day, as well as Spider-Man 2 and Lethal Weapon 4, which is criminally underrated. Now, of course, the movie is directed by Tim Burton yet again, and it's rated PG-13 for some bloody violence, a bit of language, drug use, and suggestive material. And it comes in at around 1 hour and 45 minutes. I think the original was around 1 hour and a half, so just a little bit longer than that. The movie stars, of course, yet again, Michael Keaton and Winona Ryder. You also have Catherine O'Hara making a return, being joined by Jenna Ortega, Justin Theroux, Willem Dafoe, and Monica Bellucci, who I always thought was married to Jim Belushi, but apparently their names are spelled completely differently, and she's dating Tim Burton now, so shout out to Tim. Okay, so before we get into the pros and cons, let me tell you a little bit about my expectations coming into this movie, because I feel like that has a big impact on whether or not you're going to enjoy it. So for me, I did not grow up watching the original Beetlejuice. I don't remember the first time I saw it, but I do know that I wasn't a big fan of it when I first did. In fact, I wasn't a big Tim Burton fan for a pretty long time. If I'm being honest, I just found his movies to be, I don't know, kind of attention grabby. I've definitely come around on him in the more recent years, and despite how I felt about him growing up, I did like the original Beetlejuice. I thought it was pretty good. It had some funny bits here and there, but I'm not super precious about that movie at all. And despite that, I was a bit skeptical about this new one. I don't always love when they bring back beloved older franchises for no real reason other than maybe a cash grab or a bit of nostalgia. So I went into this with an open mind, but still maybe a little bit skeptical. But how did it work out? Well, let's start with the pros. The first big pro, the first thing you're going to notice when you're watching this movie is Michael Keaton. The man is 72 years old, and he slipped back into this role perfectly. I know a lot of people were worried that he hasn't done a real comedy in a long time, but he still has his comedic chops without a doubt. And you can tell he's just having a good time as this character. Now, that being said, he is 72 years old, so I did feel like maybe the energy wasn't quite what it was back in the 80s, but if you didn't have that to compare it to, I feel like he totally nailed it here. And it's just nice to see older actors and actresses kind of in that place in their life where they're trying to relive fun moments that they had back in their youth. So it was cool to see him. You also have Catherine O'Hara, who was phenomenal in this movie. She is so delightfully insane. She's completely outrageous, over the top, hilarious. She took her character from that first movie and just brought it to a completely ridiculous higher level. And if I'm being honest, probably my favorite character in the movie. I also think Jenna Ortega did a really good job here. I was a little skeptical about her character going into this. Of course, she played Wednesday Addams in the Addams Family series that came out recently, and so I was worried that maybe her character would just be another version of that. But she really took it in a completely different direction, and I think she did a really good job. Really, not a lot of weak links when it comes to the actors and actresses in this movie. I think they all did a good job in their roles. I do have some issues with some of the characters, but I don't think that is the fault of the actors or actresses. I also really dig the style of this movie. They do a cool thing where they take a lot of what you're maybe nostalgic about, especially with things like the claymation that you saw in the first movie, and they do CG a lot of that stuff in this one, but it looks really good and it kind of stays true to that original style. They also use a lot of practical effects in here, which I absolutely love. Not everything needs to be CG, and we can still definitely tell despite all the advancements in technology. But yeah, it's really charming without seeming overproduced. Speaking of nostalgia though, they definitely have a lot of fun callbacks to the original movie, and that includes a lot of the different sets that they use are very reminiscent of that original movie. A lot of the characters actors that they call back to, their kind of characteristics, their traits. It definitely feels like we just got out of that movie and moved right into this one, despite the fact that it's been 36 years. So yeah, if you're a fan of the original movie, I think there's a lot that you're going to get out of this one that will kind of take you down memory lane a little bit in a good way. I also really just love the dark humor in this movie and in this, I guess, franchise at this point. There's a lot of twisted and wacky visual gags that they pull off. And it's just weird enough to where you're not sure what they're doing with the movie. I don't want to explain this too much because I might spoil some things, but there are things that happen in this movie that you just kind of accept as, oh, okay, they're just being weird. And then later on in the movie, things are maybe revealed that make sense. You know what? I'm just going to stop here. Let's ignore where I'm going with this. But once you watch the movie, I think you'll kind of understand what I mean, where it's like, are we just being weird or are we going somewhere with this? And I love that kind of uncertainty that you can only get out of a movie like this because it is so weird. So overall, I think there's a lot to enjoy in this movie, both for people that maybe came up on the original and for those that are just coming into this later on in their life or maybe for the first time. But it's not all rainbows and sunshine. There are definitely a few things that I did not like about this movie. But before we get to the cons, I'm curious if you plan on watching this movie or if you're interested in checking it out. Let's run a little poll here. Go ahead and like the video if you're going to be checking out Beetlejuice or if you're curious to watch it. And if you're absolutely not interested in this movie or if you think it's a complete abomination, dislike the video. Don't worry, you're not going to hurt my feelings if you hit the thumbs down button. I'll tell you what, to make it up for me, if you like reviews like this, do me a solid and subscribe. All right. Let's get on to the cons. And I have a few cons, but I think they kind of all fall under the same umbrella. Let me try to explain. First off, I think Lydia's role, that's Winona Ryder's character, I feel like we didn't get enough from her. She definitely has a lot of screen time, but we didn't get a whole lot of development of her character. She was really kind of on the back burner for Jenna Ortega's character. So I didn't love that, but I get it. But then we had other characters that we got more time with that I felt like just didn't need to be there, specifically with Monica Bellucci's character and even Willem Dafoe's. Even though I loved Willem Dafoe in this movie, I thought he was hilarious. They just had a couple subplots that I felt like were a waste of time. We could have done other things and stuck with characters that were more imperative to the plot. And that's really like the umbrella that all of my cons fall under. It has to do with the subplots and the pacing and just the way that they focus the story throughout the movie. You know, there's your A plot, there's the main plot of the story that we're following through, which of course includes Jenna Ortega and Winona Ryder and that family and Beetlejuice. But then there's a couple of other side stories that are happening at the same time that tie in a little bit, but they just felt completely unnecessary. And I feel like that's where this movie fails, but that the original did so much better. The original movie had a very straightforward plot despite all the weirdness of it. The actual story itself was pretty straightforward. And here it seems like they had that and then they just tried to sprinkle in some other things here and there that we didn't need. Aside from that, the only other real con that I have is kind of, an issue that you run into when you have sequels to these beloved classics. And that is that so much of this movie is derivative of the original. And that's one of the things that made the original so great, is that it was so unique. But now it feels like they're just tugging on a lot of these nostalgic strings that we've already seen in the older movie. And that can be cool, that could be fun if you're someone who's very nostalgic for that and you just want to get that kind of dose. But at the same time, it does just by definition make it less original than the original. So okay, those are all my thoughts on the movie, pros and cons. Who do I think Beetlejuice is for? Well, partly I would say if you're a fan of the original, there's definitely going to be a subsect of fans that want nothing to do with this movie. And if that's you, you already know it's you. So in that case, don't bother. But if you're the type of fan who enjoyed the original and just wants to get kind of another dose of that, wants to get kind of sent back into that world to enjoy it for another hour and 45 minutes, then I think there is a lot to enjoy out of this one. If you're a Tim Burton fan, there's a lot of his kind of dark and twisted humor that you get to enjoy. Or if you like Michael Keaton, I mean, it's just so great to see him in this era of his life, as I mentioned earlier. It really feels like he's just going back, whether it's with this or with The Flash playing Batman. He's just having a good time. And so if you like Michael Keaton, and especially if you like what he did with the Beetlejuice character, it's definitely worth seeing him again in this. Also, as we get closer to Halloween, it's just month or so away. This is kind of a good movie to get yourself into the mood of the season. But either way, if Beetlejuice sounds cool to you, definitely check it out in theaters this weekend. If you've already seen it, let me know what you think in the comments below. And of course, if you just want to keep up to speed on all the new big movies coming out, make sure you subscribe. All right, my dude, I'll catch you in the next one. Be good.